This video will give you a short overview on how to create references using the APA style format. Unlike other styles that use footnotes or endnotes, APA uses the author date system to cite sources. In this system, every in-text citation has to have two elements, the author's name and a date. The person reading your in-text citation will then be able to turn to your reference list and find the rest of the citation information for that particular source. Of course, there may be times when either the author or the date is missing, but APA has rules that describe what to do in those situations, and we'll touch on those rules later in the video. When APA was created in 1929, there were a few guidelines for authors to follow in citing someone else's work, so people usually just did what made sense to them. For example, here are two articles from the same journal published in 1918. In the first one, the author created a fairly good citation. It has the author's name, the title of the work, and so on. Compare that citation to this one. As you can see, the date is missing, and it's hard to tell if social psychology is a book, journal, or something else. To eliminate this confusion for the reader, APA requires that each reference include four specific elements: who, when, what, and where. In this case, who refers to the author or authors of the work you are citing. When refers to the year it was published. What refers to the title of the thing you are citing, such as a journal article. And where refers to the source where that item was published, such as a book, journal, or website. If you can find these four elements, you can build a correct APA reference. Let's see how this works using a journal article as an example. We'll start by asking, who wrote this article? Laura Ferran Lewis. When was it published? 2016. What is the title? Realizing a Diagnosis of Autism Spectrum Disorder as an Adult. And finally, where was it published? The International Journal of Mental Health Nursing. When we put these four elements together, we get a complete APA reference for this journal article. Of course, it's important to note that the where element usually includes some extra information that will vary depending on the type of item you're trying to cite. For journal articles, you'll need to add the volume and issue, the page numbers, and the Digital Object Identifier, or DOI. The DOI is a unique string of letters and numbers assigned to a specific article. DOIs have only been around since the early 2000s, so there is a chance that you may run into situations where there is no DOI for the article you want to cite. If that happens, add the words retrieved from and the URL to the journal's homepage, not the page where you found the article, at the end of the reference. In this example, we use the URL for the homepage of the International Journal of Mental Health Nursing. Journal articles are pretty easy to cite because that format has been around for a long time, and publishers know that they should include all four pieces of information. That's not necessarily the case with websites, but you can still use the four elements to build your reference. We'll use this website on the flu from the Centers for Disease Control to illustrate how this works. So let's start by asking our questions. Who is the author of this website? Like a lot of websites, there is no specific person listed as author, but authors are not just people. Organizations can be considered authors as well. In this example, the only organization listed is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, so that's who we'll list as the author. When was it published? It can be hard to find a publication date on a website. A good place to look is at the bottom of the web page. In this example, we see two dates, last reviewed and last updated. Last updated suggests that some kind of change was made to this document and then it was published on October 5th, 2017. So we'll use 2017 for our date. It doesn't make any difference in this case because the dates are the same, but never use a last reviewed or a copyrighted year as a date because you can't be sure that any changes were made to the content. What about the title page of this web page? Which one do you think it is? Influenza, flu, seasonal influenza, flu, about flu, or how flu spreads. The last option, how flu spreads, is correct. The reason why is because all the other options have multiple pages that fall underneath them. Since we want to direct the reader to the specific page called How Flu Spreads, that's the title we'll use. Last but not least, where was this published? This is the easiest answer to find when dealing with web pages. Just list the URL, which is located at the top of the page. This is what our reference for a web page looks like when we put all four elements together. Now you might be asking yourself, what if there is no author? The answer is simple. Just move the title into the first position of your reference and then fill in the rest of the reference as you normally would. For your in-text citation, just use the first few words of the title and the date. But what if there is no date? Just use N period D period in place of the date. The rest of the reference is the same. For your in-text citation, use the author or the first few words of the title if there is no author, and N period D period. That's it. One of the things about APA that people really struggle with are the punctuation and formatting rules. For example, why is this a period and not a comma? And why are these words capitalized, but these words aren't? It's all enough to give anyone a headache, but there actually are some rules that you can follow that will help make sense of all this. Let's start with punctuation. For example, how can you tell if you should use a comma or a period? The answer is actually pretty simple. You should use a period to separate the who, when, what, and where elements in your reference. Commas, on the other hand, are used to break up information within each element, such as the author's first and last name, or the journal name, volume, and page numbers in the where element. One final thing to keep an eye out for is the period at the end of your reference. Don't put a period there if the last piece of information is a DOI or a URL. If you do, people may mistakenly think that it is actually a part of the DOI or URL and include it when they type the link into the browser. This will break the link and prevent them from connecting to your reference. That was pretty simple, so what about the formatting rules? Capitalization and italics are primarily used to make it easier for the reader to pick out the information in the what and the where elements. The easiest way to figure out when to capitalize and when to put something in italics is to ask yourself, does this thing I'm trying to cite stand alone by itself, or is it a part of a larger work? Let's take a journal article as an example. Is a journal article a part of a larger work? The answer almost always is yes. It's a part of a specific journal issue that contains other articles. As a result, we only capitalize the first word of the title and the subtitle if there is one, as well as any proper nouns like a person's name. This is called sentence case because it follows the same capitalization rule that you would use when writing a sentence. When you use sentence case, you do not put the title in italics. But what about the overall journal? Journals stand alone by themselves and are not considered to be a part of anything else. As a result, the first letter of most of the words in the title is always capitalized. This is called title case. When you use title case, you put the entire title into italics. What about websites? As we already know, websites can be tricky to cite, but you should still ask the same basic question. Is the page I'm citing a part of a larger work or not? Let's go back to our How Flu Spreads example to see how this works. When you look at this page, you can see that it is a part of the About Flu section, which is actually a part of the Seasonal Influenza section, which is one part of the overall influenza flu site. Since it's pretty clear that the How Flu Spreads page is a part of the overall site, we put the title in sentence case and do not use italics like this. Of course, if we were citing the whole website, we'd capitalize most of the words in the title and put the title in italics. Now you might be asking yourself, what if I can't decide if I need to cite a subpage or the whole site? In that instance, APA suggests that you treat the web page you were citing as if it was a part of a larger work, which means you would use sentence case and not italicize. APA style can be difficult to understand when you are just starting out, but it's something that you will probably have to use a lot, so it's a good idea to get as comfortable with it as you can. Remember to use the 4 questions: who, when, what, and where, to identify the elements that you need in order to create a good reference, and be sure to follow the punctuation and formatting guidelines in this video. If you do, you should be in good shape. If you still run into problems when trying to cite something, there are several sources that you can turn to get help, such as the APA Manual, the APA Citation LibGuide, the UVM Writing Center, and your trusty librarian. Good luck, and remember, when in doubt, keep calm and follow APA.